I'm Dorothy Rowe, and the video you're about to watch is a clip from a live webinar. If you enjoy the content of this video, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments. Thank you. Knowledge is stable, but when healing is required, that means movement. It means transformation. It means change. So what catalyzes the change is compassion. And so if we look at the form of Dharma, we see that knowledge is the first pillar and is the most stable and is the most reliable, that bringing truth to any situation tends to benefit it and bring up the orient things towards evolution. But then the next little bit less stable leg, but also very essential, they're all essential, is compassion. And one of the principles yesterday, and one of the reasons I think it's important to bring it up today, is because we all need and deserve this particular facet of truth, which is I've decided, I've looked at it at the causal level, it's mostly causal, this element of compassion, the causal level, but then also at the astral level, there is a matrix that associates with compassion. So there is a compassion matrix, and all the flavors or nuances of the ways that compassion can show up, they kind of work together. They fit together in a kind of sacred geometrical form that makes them orderly. And it's interesting because when I think of the expressions of compassion, they appear infinite. They're infinite expressions of compassion, but there are, and I guess for those of you who aren't on my daily remote healings, let's see if I can open this up for you. I do have a diagram. Compassion is infinite. If you look at this circle, there are infinite numbers of shades and variations of colors that can be had out of this color sphere. But it's also, even though it's an infinite number of shades and variations within the spectrum of color, it's still within the spectrum of color. And that's how it is for compassion as well, that within the spectrum of compassion, there are infinite numbers and ways and varieties that compassion can show up in order to support the healing effect. When there's an imbalance, part of the story of energy healing is to follow I'm kind of small for you, but I hope you can get me over here, over here in the corner. Yeah, so there are specific underlying imbalances in the field of consciousness, in the manifest level of the physiology, usually very deep, which is why a symptom will be present for a consistent period of time. And once the seed of that imbalance has been identified, then there will be a particular nuance of compassion that precisely counteracts that seed of imbalance. Whatever that feeling is, if you're feeling worthless, there's a feeling of unconditional acceptance. Or if you're feeling ashamed and remorseful and embarrassed, there's a value of forgiveness. And there are all varieties, so many varieties. And one of the varieties we were talking about last night was, even if we go onto our color circle here again, we can look at this. Do you see down at the bottom? It's so dark. It's so dark down here, but these colors are important too, right? Like if our world didn't have all these colors, it would look washed out and dull. So we need all the colors. And so even the fiercer, darker energies can combine with compassion. Like you can put anger and compassion together. That can actually happen. And when that happens, anger will often come out in a way that is gentle enough that it can move the mountains that it was designed to move, and at the same time, not embarrass anybody. Well, the compassion element supports everyone's ability in whatever situation we're dealing with to maintain their dignity and to be able to accept the truth, because it's the truth that actually comes to transform the situation. But the catalyst is the compassion. It's my intention now to just take a moment and make sure that everybody, this is just doubling over, by the way, because we did this in the silence as well, but our 3 minutes of silence, but just doubling over this download for everyone, that everyone receives the entire spectrum of all the nuances of compassion, comes right into the heart energy center, so that you own that. That is yours. No part is left open. No part is left uncollected or undone or unaccepted We're not rejecting any aspect of our nature, because our nature, every single nuance of person, even being selfish or even being small-minded or any of these things, can still combine with compassion to produce a positive, beneficial evolutionary effect. And that, of course, is when included the grounding into the source of creation, because it's the source of creation that provides the foundation for the blueprint of how things are going to show up. So the compassion catalyzes the healing process, but the actual way in which that healing process makes its way up to the surface is constrained by the laws of nature. It is overseen by the fundamental intention of the silent source of creation to show up as the diversified universe. Just checking everyone's heart chakras for a minute. Heart energy centers, Mahamarmas, heart Mahamarmas. It's a beautiful piece of knowledge. Everybody can benefit from it. Everybody deserves access. And isn't it interesting that combining that whole spectrum of light with compassion changes the way we think about ourselves, right? Because there are times when, it's like, well, I shouldn't have been so angry, or I should have said this instead of what I said, or whatever it is, whatever that experience is that one is having. But the fact is, what shows up at the surface is what shows at the surface, because that is what has the support of nature to show up. And when we connect it, when we shine the light of compassion upon it, which is definitely a heart function. So that's the next thing. Now we move into, that was the overview of yesterday. Now we move into the healing for today. The heart function is to shine all these experiences in the light of compassion. And the light of compassion uplifts it. It definitely shines like the most favorable, a very favorable light on whatever that thing is. But whatever we're looking at, whatever aspect of our own personality or self we're looking at, but also through the compassion is the vehicle, but through the compassion is the light of pure awareness, pure perception, the pure light of being, which designed the intent by which the surface expressions are manifest. So that's really the self. The compassion isn't the self. The compassion is the vehicle or the tool, just like the body is the vehicle or the tool. This I can see in, not only is the compassion wheel, we could call it a compassion wheel or compassion matrix, not only is that getting nicely established and settled into the heart energy center, but also the habit or pattern of leveraging compassion as an instrument whenever things go awry. So your first gut reaction is some feeling, like say things go poorly, they don't go as expected, right? The first gut reaction is maybe feeling frustrated or angry, but then the light of compassion comes in and it colors that frustration and anger, thus turning it into a tool for evolution. And then who decides how the evolution goes? The self decides. The self with a big S self, right there in the gap. And that's where the shift is taking place. And this is all happening for the heart energy centers, for everybody in today's healing session, as well as I am seeing it going to ancestors. And for most people in this session, also to past lives. Just feeling that shift. Just feeling that upgrade for everybody. The upgrade in this part of the physiology then affects the nervous system in this part of the physiology. And as we know, the heart itself has a neural network around it. So as the nervous system around the heart starts to shift, then that creates a more open framework for the functioning of the heart. Flexibility and stability simultaneously for the heart. Example, so after a webinar, it was a few years back, I was in one room broadcasting, and my mother was in the living room. I hope you don't mind, Mom. I'm using you as an example. She was in the other room watching. And I came out and I looked at her and she said, I don't quite feel right. And I saw something was happening in her heart. So I put my hands there, and it was like an event occurred. It was just, I just felt the shift. There's some energy shift. And she said she didn't feel too good. She was going to go upstairs to sleep, take a nap. And the next day she came down. She's like, I still don't feel very good. I think something's wrong. So we made quick a doctor appointment. We called and she said, oh, I'll go in next week. We called and they're like, come in now. So she went in. Turns out she had passed a blood clot that big, an inch and a half, through her heart. That doesn't normally happen. Usually that means the heart stops. But it didn't in this case because the flexibility and the stability. I use you as an example because you are so brilliant, and that my mother is there in 94 already, so living all this beautiful life, and this stability and adaptability in the heart allowed the heart to do what it needed to do at that moment to accommodate the blood clot that was coming through. That level of stability and adaptability. That also is a download for everyone's heart. What is that level of infinite stability, infinite adaptability? Infinite comes from the connection to wholeness. Stability, anchored to wholeness. Adaptability, anchored to wholeness. That's why it's so useful and luscious to have that little moment of silence at the end of we put the attention, the awareness or attention into the heart to have that level of that quality of stability, that quality of adaptability. And then the silence just brings the awareness and anchors it. It anchors it. It's pretty simple. You can do this. Like we're exampling it in the webinar, but the reason that we do it again and again, and this happened yesterday too, as I recall, there were like 2, 3, 4 times in a row we did some process just like this. And I realized we just do it together again and again. And each one of us in the webinar is looking at the process from our own unique perspective through our own filters, through the filter of our nervous system and our sense of self. And that, when we come together as a collective and we do that, it provides a broader comprehension for everybody because we share a little bit. We're sharing this time. Even if you're watching this video not in the exact same time that I'm making the video, that's fine. It still is something that we're sharing together on the level of consciousness, because at these fine levels of consciousness, and particularly here, there are no constraints of space and time. So we just do it together. It's beautiful. Congratulations, everyone. And I think this is probably one of the most important features of energy healing, is how we make these changes on the deeper levels of consciousness, but then the change actually modifies the physicality. It modifies the physical expression. And in this case, the neural network that surrounds the heart, all around the heart, and bringing in infinite flexibility and infinite stability, so that then the heart has that ability that, if an event occurs, the heart can just go, oh, I've got that. And then you're good. Then you're good. The clot ended up in the lungs. She took a little bit of blood thinner and the clot disappeared and all is well. The end of the story was, it was a happy ending and they rode off into the sunset. Yay. Okay.